Thank you, organizers of this conference, for bringing me out. It's really nice to be in my own backyard. I'm a Denver guy, and so I have big skies and big mountains in my blood, just like you do. I also have big, cheap landfills in my experience, just like you do. So I just want you to know I'm not coming here from some neighborhood where they have the convenience of an $80 or $100 a ton landfill. My career has been spent, building recycling programs in an environment where the economics don't necessarily help. But going around the world, I have an opportunity to see how other people address this issue of waste. And it's really interesting to see that your landfill rate, from what I'm told, is about half of the national average in the US. I got you beat. We're at $17 a ton. And then I go over to Europe where, it's between $200 and $250 a ton to landfill. And it's kind of funny because we're all using the same technology. So what's that about? Well, what it's about is it's the same reason you can go to Saudi Arabia and buy gasoline for your car for 19 cents a gallon. And we're all paying $4 or whatever. And you go to Europe and you're going to pay $10 a gallon. It's the same gas. What's going on? And that's a big part of what I'm going to talk about today. Recycling was born 30 years ago as sort of it wasn't even single bottom line activity, it was a negative bottom line activity. Nobody was making money, and that's why we all started as nonprofits. In the 90s, it became a single bottom line industry. It became business. Some people started making some money, and that's both good and bad. Zero waste was born as a double bottom line activity. And all this really means is that when you've got landfill rates going from $17 a ton to $250 a ton, when you got gasoline going from 19 cents a gallon to $10 a gallon, what it says is that economics is not a hard science, right? It's a social science. It's a political issue. And that means it's a community issue. And somebody is deciding what is good for that community. And they're helping price certain activities at certain levels based upon their opinions about what's good for that community. And so I'm going to invite you to take my little journey, take that leap between the rocks, because that leap happens between your ears first, and let's look at waste as not a single bottom line issue, because I don't believe it is. So first of all, who's EcoCycle? Well, you heard a little bit about us. We've been around a while. This is my day job. I run a large organization. We're diverting 55,000 tons a year approximately right now. I call us a social enterprise, and what that means is we're financially sufficient at this point. For over the last 20 years, we've been supporting ourselves. I try to make 10% on everything I touch. 10% in the world of business is not much, as you know, but it's enough for us to be stable and to slowly grow ourselves. Those two pictures are there for a purpose, because we are a double bottom line company. Our primary mission is on the left. It's the kids, it's the future, it's sustainability, it's all the topics we're here for today. But on the right, we run a fleet of trucks. We know what it's like to be in the trenches. We know the real operating systems of the waste management system. So we combine those two, and that's where I'm coming from. We don't do it in a vacuum. We live in a world where some big things are happening. We know the planet's warming. We can argue about why, but we do know that the weather patterns are changing. I know my ski industry in Colorado is worried sick, and yours probably is too. Our snow patterns have changed dramatically in the last 20 years. Peak soil, we've got just about peak everything coming. We've got peak minerals, and this is coming from industry. They're having conferences right now talking about peak everything. And I just read the other day about peak people and the job shortages that are going to exist in about 10 or 15 years. I tell my kids, hey, that's good news for you. But the baby boomers are retiring at a rate of 10,000 a day right now. And so peak soil is a real issue because food is the bottom line issue. Without food and water, we're nothing. Resource wars are here today. It's not something coming, it's here right now. And it's over timber in Indonesia, water in the Horn of Africa, oil in the Middle East, minerals in Central Africa, you name it. There are wars happening around the planet for access to natural resources. So we're already in the middle. We've just begun with that one, actually. And finally, our great country needs work. This is ridiculous that we've got millions of people who want to work and they don't have an opportunity, because work brings dignity, work brings community, work brings everything we need. I maintain that landfills and incinerators fail the test on those 4 mega trends. And that's why we're seeing a shift away from them. And we're shifting into something good. Today, it's all good news, actually. So taking out the trash ain't what it used to be. This has been a trend for a couple decades now. Got started outside this country a lot faster. But there's important lessons to be learned outside this country. Germany, the great engineers of the world, they have figured out that you got to process things before you bury it, because there's no way to prevent leachate and methane emissions. Norway, they understood that landfills and incinerators create externalities that no one's paying for in the form of groundwater pollution and air pollution. So they did some number crunching about a decade ago. They tacked on $70 a ton fee to their landfill. Remember I said in Europe it's 200 plus? This is how they get there. They've decided somebody's going to pay for the pollution of the landfill and incinerators. Ontario, they've got their manufacturing businesses now footing the bill for the curbside collection programs. And producer responsibility in the EU, that's finally coming to our shores, and it's interesting dialogue with American companies. So in 2008, the zero waste thing hit the big time. This is Newsweek magazine. That's me sitting on a bale of plastic that goes into plastic lumber. But really, we launched this thing in '96 with the Grassroots Recycling Network, and we were laughed at for a decade. But it really started to take off. Industry gets zero waste. Walmart has a zero waste policy. GM, I mean, you go down the list. Industry gets that waste is expensive and it's not necessary. It's a product of bad design, and bad design can be changed. And so in 2008, zero waste was picked as the #1 fix for the planet. So today I'm going to talk about 4 things quickly, and I apologize now, way too many slides, way too many words, but my speech is part inspirational, but part operational too. I'm an operations guy, so I got to throw in some details for you. So first, what is zero waste? There's still confusion over that. Why 10-year plan? How do you get to 90%, and why is 90%? And what do you do with whatever's left? So what is zero waste? First of all, it's a total commitment, and those are the 2 important words. Total commitment to work towards zero. And you got to look downstream. We all know, let's get it, out of the landfills and incinerators. Let's get it back into the society. Midstream is sort of a new concept that my buddy in Austin, Texas created. That's, once it's in the community, let's keep it there. And then upstream, of course, is waste reduction. Let's stop waste before it starts. One of the most important things about upstream is that I don't think we're paying a close enough attention to how our tax dollars are being spent. That amount of money, in fact, I think tax dollars makes up the largest amount of money spent in our economy, be it local, state, and federal. That's our money. That's community money. We should be buying the future we want with that money. And we're not. We're not having that dialogue about how we should be spending our own money to support green businesses so they make the profits. What is zero waste? Well, what is zero waste not? And this is where it gets a little controversial. It's not ISWM, Integrated Solid Waste Management. A lot of you have spent your careers doing ISWM. It's not that ISWM is bad. At the time, it was great when it was launched in the early 90s. It made sense, but it doesn't make sense anymore. And so we need to evolve beyond it. What ISWM said was, we're going to bury a little, we're going to burn a little, we're going to recycle a little. And like I said, zero waste community is a total commitment to zero. If you don't make it a total commitment, you won't get close to that goal. Number 2, it doesn't require getting to zero. And that was a decision made by the international group that I helped form 12 years ago. We decided that 100%, we don't know if we're ever going to get to absolute zero, and that doesn't matter. Zero waste is a journey, it's not a destination. And we decided any community got to 90% had sufficiently changed the world. And believe me, no one's got to 90% yet. San Francisco's just about at 80%, and they have changed the world in San Francisco. So right now, at least, you can get to 90% and call yourself a zero waste community. And finally, we don't accept the current, notice the word current, waste to energy and landfill technologies out in the marketplace. What that means is, particularly for landfills, because out west here, that's what we use. What that means is we need to start processing the material before we bury it, like Germany does. That can be very simple and inexpensive. That can be just some big windrows at the landfill for 30 days and a front loader turning it, and Europe's shown that you can stabilize the biological material in that pile 90% in 30 days. Then bury it. That way you're creating CO2 instead of methane. Methane, which is, in its lifetime, 100 times worse than CO2. Methane lives only 10 years in the atmosphere. So we think that the landfilling practices can be changed inexpensively, and it's bigger than the windrows I just explained. I have a vision for what we ought to be doing, but that's the cheapest, easiest way to stabilize your mixed waste before you bury it. And the waste to energy technologies, let's get real. The only thing being sold out in the marketplace right now is mass burn. There's no sorting going on. They're just throwing it in the burner, and then they sift the metals out afterwards, and they have 10 to 15% ash left. So you still need a landfill anyway. So the future is landfill or landfill. Landfill with a burner at the gate, or landfill with a recycling facility and a stabilization facility at the gate. I'll talk more about why I think waste to energy is not such a smart path. I said in 2008 there was sort of a aha. Well, in 2010 the real aha came. This is the National Solid Waste Management Association. These are the trash guys. These are the ones I fought my whole career. And these are the ones that said, we support the concept of zero waste. Now, of course, they didn't quite embrace our definition of it. And so we've had a challenge helping them understand that they can't hijack the term. And so recently I wrote in Biocycle, zero landfill is not zero waste. They're trying to make everybody feel good about recycling 50% and burning 50%. That's their agenda. And we're not going to take it. Zero waste is zero waste. We're going to get 90% recovery and 10% landfill plus, I'll call it. So our foundation, the one we stand upon, I mentioned earlier already, is that there are externalities to this waste industry that are not being accounted for. Thus, we believe it's a social issue first and a market issue second. That turns on the head the history of waste management in America. Because in our country, it's always been a market issue first, a social issue second. But in Europe, it was always a social issue first. In Australia, New Zealand, a lot of other places, it was like, no, waste is a social issue. Well, out in the Rocky Mountain West, where it's a free-for-all, as you know, very few governments even contract or collect the material. We don't have any responsibility for any of the waste. Well, the rest of the world does. And so, we all need to catch up with the idea that it's a social issue first. Once you embrace that idea, then you start to understand how you can buy gasoline for 19 cents a gallon. All right, so why 10 years? Well, like I said, it's a journey, it's not a destination. You need some time. This is not going to happen quickly. And there's 4 primary reasons why a 10-year time frame makes sense. The first one is, don't make an expensive mistake. There's an incinerator being proposed in Frederick, Maryland right now for $500 million. Once they build that, do you think they are ever going to go after zero waste? No. They're stuck. They have cemented themselves in place. So be careful about making expensive investments. The zero waste economy doesn't require large, expensive investments like an incinerator or a big landfill does. Number 2, physical infrastructure shift. It takes time. Lord knows. I have figured out it takes about, every facility I tried to build, takes about 10 years to build, to get through the planning process and get the funding together and get the land and get the everything, and then boom. It takes about 10 years to get anything built. So you really have to get started on what I call the big 6, and I'll show you what those 6 facilities are that you're going to need to build in Utah. Every community is going to need them. Regulation takes time. You got to go fight out this stuff. We're talking about change. Change doesn't come easy. So the process down in the State House or your local city council, it's a process of education. It's a process of getting people to join you, using honey instead of the stick whenever you can. And finally, the toughest of all is the behavioral shift. That is the toughest of all, getting us to actually change our behavior. That takes time. Sorting the material at the source, it's as simple as that. If we got everybody to start using 3 or 4 bins, and I say 3 or 4 because I think single stream recycling is fine. I run a plant. I don't think it's for everybody. I think if your community's not big enough, dual stream recycling still works great. And then the 3rd bin would be organics, and the 4th bin would be residue. And the 5th bin is for hard to recycle items, but we're just developing that, and I'll talk about that in a little bit more. So here's the big 6 that y'all got to start building if you don't have them already. First one is your traditional recycling MRF. We all know what that one is. Single stream or dual stream. Second one is your organics recycling facility. That's not just yard waste, that's food waste, that's soil paper, that's bioplastics, that's anything that's going to go into a landfill and create methane. Get it out, compost it. Third one is CD&D, construction, deconstruction, and demolition. We all know what that is. There's a lot of stuff that goes in the ground. Number 4, this is the newest one, Center for Hard to Recycle Material. I won't explain it here. I give a whole speech about it because we built the first one in the country. It's basically non-traditional recycling. It's where you bring your white block styrofoam, you bring the big plastic swimming pool from the backyard that broke, you bring plastic bags, you bring tennis shoes, you bring computers. You know, go to our website, you won't believe, we recycle yoga mats, but we're bolder, right? It's really neat what we do with them, by the way. We found a local business that's washing the old yoga mats and then cutting them up and using them as padding for iPad cases. Yeah, it's work. It's keeping that resource in use. Number 5, reuse and repair. The used building materials sector is profitable and growing. And we all know the price of a 2x4 has gone up, and it's not going down. It just keeps going up. So we need to get into this used building material thing. And then finally, the residual sort, stabilize, and transfer. Sort to get the recyclables out, stabilize it so it doesn't create methane underground, and then transfer it to a landfill. Just real quickly, I don't have to go through these because you know the facilities. These are pictures of what they look like. They're all over the place. Really, we have experience in economics for everything except charm. That's the only one that's new enough that we don't have a lot of economics yet, and I'm working that up for an article in Biocycle. But everything else, we pretty much understand how it works in the economics. This one, MBT to landfill, MBT stands for mechanical biological treatment. Mechanical being, let's sort out the recyclables. Biological meaning, let's stabilize the biological fraction and then transfer it. We don't have those in this country like Europe does, and I think that we need to start building those. In fact, you have a big landfill, and I'm going to show you a picture of something that I call the new landfill gate. It would be fantastic to come and build the first zero waste park here with you. The other thing you can do while you're sorting, I like what the Italians have done. They're going through to find the things that in the waste stream that are not recyclable or compostable. And they're pulling them out, and they're sending them back to industry. And they're saying, do something about this, or else we're going to ban your product from our town. And they've got the attention. The first one they did was these little plastic coffee cups. And they're talking to Lavazza, I think the name of the biggest coffee company in Italy. And they're talking to them about making those bioplastic so they can go in the compost bin. And that's the kind of constructive dialogue I think that we can get into with industry. They don't want to do the wrong thing, but there has to be consequences if they do the wrong thing. And so the Italians have started to pull out stuff that doesn't fit into their local zero waste system. So where are we at right now? To move forward, to divert 90% and reduce your waste stream. EcoCycle created this thing called the bridge strategy. It's in 3 phases, years 1 to 4. Now there's a whole bunch of detail behind this. I'm giving you the top line here. It's all about access to service. You got to create convenient access for all of your businesses, institutions, and public. Universal curbside recycling. Universal is not the same as mandatory. Universal just means everybody has the bin. It's still their choice whether to use it or not. Organics collection, C&D deposits on that stuff. So your first 4 years, you can pretty cheaply get this going while you're building your big 6 facilities. You're setting a community goal. You're creating unit-based pricing. I don't know how much pay-as-you-throw is around here, but I remember growing up in Denver when you could turn on the water hose and let it run for a month and your $10 water bill never changed. Finally, Denver started doing unit-based pricing. Well, that's what we have to do with selling landfill airspace. We're selling increments of landfill airspace. And so that's the unit, 32 gallons of air. And then lobby for state level enabling legislation. It's amazing how the landfill industry and the incinerator industry, they've been working the Capitol for 30 years. they've got all the rules they like in place. Now we're going to have to go and look at those and tweak them. And then fund your community education, $2 per person per head. That's not a lot of money, $2 per person per year. But when it adds up, if you got a community of 100,000, that's a community education fund of $200,000. Because remember I said, the toughest thing in this whole thing is behavior shift, getting people to change their actual behavior. So it has to be comprehensive, it has to be well funded, it has to be forever, and it has to be slowly increasing. Phase 2, years 5 to 8. You're going to get to 70% recovery. And now you're going to require separated waste systems. We've seen that. No one likes this, but we've seen that that's the only way you can get beyond these 50 and 60% levels. San Francisco, Toronto, Vancouver, Nova Scotia, we're starting to see the leaders and how they're requiring separation. It's not that tough, especially after everyone knows how it works and the bins are convenient. Haulers, you should love this, because now you are going to be making more money, offering more services to your clients. I've made my local trash hauler twice as rich as he would have been without this. So I don't think the haulers should be threatened by any of this. The only people who may not like this is a privately owned landfill. In my neck of the woods, it is privately owned, so they lose money when we win. I understand the big landfill outside Salt Lake City is public, so the public wins if that landfill lasts twice as long. But other than that, there's winners all around on this thing. Bi-weekly trash service. Watch Portland. They're the first big city to launch every other week trash. And why is that so important? Because you want to do the organics collection weekly. And if people don't use their compost bin and the trash sits out there for 2 weeks, it'll start to stink. So it's a real incentive to use the compost bin, because you know that bin's getting picked up every week. And really, if there's no organics in your trash, it could sit out there for 2, 3, 4 weeks. It doesn't matter, it's almost junk, it's all junk plastic anyway, after you recycle an organic and compost. And then C and D, you just keep on moving that up. Again, more of the soft rules. You start analyzing the residue. You start moving into take-back requirements for your stores. You get new rules, through the government. The waste reduction targets, you start really measuring, not landfill diversion in tons, but really discard, instead of the word waste, we'll use the word waste, discard generation per person per year. That's really where you want to start working. Watch the city of Oakland on that one. They're further than anybody right now in trying to measure actual waste reduction, or I should say discard creation. And finally, the last 2 years, we don't know what these are. We're just guessing because nobody's gotten this far. But we think that it's really going to be linking arms with industry much more than we have in the past, and making sure that they have what's called rates and dates. We want certain rates of recovering by certain dates, and if industry doesn't do it, then the public will step in and we'll tell them how to do it. Industry doesn't want that. I don't want that. Industry, they know the answers better than we do. But they have to be incentivized to go find them, or else they won't. And I'm not condemning them for that. They are being economically rational in pursuing the greatest profit they can. And sustainability is not in their bottom line. We all got to realize that. So if we want it in their bottom line, we have to create it for them. So really, you get down, let's say you're successful, you get to 80% or so, like San Francisco's at 80%. What are you going to do with what's left, that last 10 to 20%? This is an important dialogue that we've really kicked into gear the last couple of years, because we're finding the waste energy industry is starting to go around the country saying, burn it and make electricity. It's the right thing to do. Well, here's the principles about what you want to do with that last 10 to 30%. Low financial investment, because let's say you hit 70% and you got 30, you don't want to invest $500 million in a burner because you'll never get past that 70%. You have to feed the burner to pay the bank back. So you're stuck, okay? So try to keep your investment down. Of course, minimize the environmental hazards, biostabilize the mixed waste, identify what's still in there that shouldn't be in there, and then do the rates and dates approach with industry to start moving forward. So see, these are some of the principles that you put on the table, and then you ask, okay, so who answers this? Well, landfills answer this. Almost every analysis you take, a landfill with a new front gate takes care of the problem better than a landfill with a burn unit at the front gate. We call it safer landfilling, for lack of a better term. So, you know, some of the things I've already said. Waste energy investment for only 30% of the community discards, you can't make it work. I gave a speech in the last couple of years to Swana, and they finally got it. That if a community's pursuing with a total commitment zero waste, a waste energy plant's probably not going to make it in their town, economically speaking. Forget the environmental. Wall Street, it's hard to fool Wall Street. There has not been a new greenfield waste energy plant in this country in 15 years. There's been additions, there's been expansions, but nobody has broken ground on a new one because the economics just don't cut it. And I think that's going to kill it in the end. So what you've heard a lot about lately is these things called conversion technologies, the gasification and the pyrolysis and the plasma. Well, guess what? All those things work in the lab at the bench scale. No one has built a commercial model of any of those yet. So it's don't be talking about, you know, the new waste energy technologies that's going to save us. It's kind of like talking about the new cheap nuclear plant that's going to save us. It doesn't exist. It's just in somebody's head still. What we're dealing with is big, dirty mass burn plants. That's what's being marketed right now. And Wall Street doesn't like them. Don't blame them. Also, can they coexist with recycling? Those guys say it can. Well, when the crash of 2008 hit, you got some of these quotes, which I'm sorry you can't read very well. Basically, it was the guys that were running the burners down in Florida said, well, we kind of got a problem because waste really dropped with that economic drop. We don't have enough fuel, but we can't stop our recycling programs. You know, we can't go burning recyclables. What are we going to do? So, you know, in tough times, the truth was revealed that they like burning things like paper because that's a good fuel for them. And so I don't buy it. If you take the total commitment approach to zero waste, these two things don't coexist. And there's a fact that no one talks about because the International Climate Change IPCC folks made a mistake, and MIT says they made a mistake, not just Eric Lombardi. They're exempting biogenic material from the emissions, greenhouse gas emissions. Well, what that means is if it's a piece of paper or if it's yard waste or something, you don't have to count the carbon that comes out the stacks because theoretically it's going to grow back in the next 20 years or something. Well, MIT's done a paper and said if you go with that rule, you are effectively going to deforestate the planet. Everyone is going to cut down trees and burn it to make electricity. You blew it. And there are very high-level discussions going on around the world about every piece of carbon being counted. No more exemptions. Well, guess what? Burning trash is the dirtiest. This is an EPA graph. So there's the fact. So you got to be careful with the politics. You could get caught on the wrong side of that one. And so this, again, can't see it very well, but it's a 20-acre zero-waste park I designed for the island of Kauai because they were going to build a burner. And this plant has all the big six in it. It has the zero waste transfer station. It's at the mouth of the landfill. And the more I've worked with it, I didn't get to build it, unfortunately, but we're still talking. I think the way forward is to build these things at the gate of every landfill. We've got thousands of landfills around the world. Let's build this gate. Let's build these facilities. Let's build one in Salt Lake City. And then let's create the financial incentives for everybody to source separate because that little facility will only cost you $40 to $50 million to build. And I figured out that if you have $80 a ton landfill rates and $80 a ton value for recyclables, it breaks even. Your whole discard management system is net zero cost. Right now, the value of recyclables is about $105. And getting to an $80 a ton tip fee is simply a policy decision. It's, you know, the national average 50 right now. We're on our way. So I think there's good news here. I think these zero waste parks have a real opportunity for a lot of money, a lot of jobs, and a lot of environmental impact. Real quickly, the next steps for our cities. What I would urge you to focus on right now is get the organics out of landfills because we know there's a massive greenhouse gas impact happening. There's a couple of national campaigns, one of them called Cool 2012, that's a website. The other one is Garbage is Not Renewable Energy. There's a lot of facts there. So I think we got to focus on, composting. It's the next big leap forward. Separated waste is also the next big leap forward. Jack Macy in San Francisco said his city would be at 90% if everybody just used the systems that they've now invested in. So we're not pie in the sky. We know this is attainable. And finally, look at the waste and climate connection differently. The EPA's come up with what's called the consumption model versus the sector model. The sector model just says, okay, how many greenhouse gases are coming out of the tailpipes and smokestacks. This says how much greenhouse gas is generated by how we live. And I'll give you an example of why the old system fails. If you recycled every piece of metal in Ogden, you wouldn't get any greenhouse gas reduction credit under the IPCC model. It doesn't matter. So you need to realize those models were built in 1994-95, back when scientists thought that climate change over a 100-year period was radically short. That's why they put 500 years up there. And then another group of scientists said, no, we got to affect the climate in 20 years. So in their reports, you have 20, 100, and 500-year impacts. Now we know, 20 years later, and I love that phrase, now we know that we need to focus on short-term greenhouse gas reductions. We got to focus on keeping the Arctic ice from melting. That's a whole nother speech. So in closing, why bother? This is a lot of work, right? I think it's good news. I think it's exciting work. I've watched it inspire people. If you're a 40-something person, your eyes light up. If you're a 60-something person, I watch the eyes kind of dim. And so I challenge the older professionals who have really all the power in this industry, open up your mind to change. And if you're not going to do it yourself, at least support the 40-year-old that's working for you, because this is the way they want to go, okay? We got lots of jobs. How many jobs are we supposed to create to get back on path? 8 million or something like that? A new report just came out and said if we got the recycling rate of America up to only 75%, that's 1.5 million new jobs. We took care of a quarter of the problem just through this, without a lot of money. Zero waste millionaires are waiting in the wings. I have a whole speech I bring to graduate schools, MBA schools. MBA students love this stuff. They really want a good job. They want to help the planet, and they want to make some money. It's cheaper. Another study just came out of 3-can systems in Canada and the US. Look at the average tip fee. The average collection cost for 3-can is $22. Go to compost for $44, landfill for $61, incinerator for $92. We're not talking about a more expensive system. We're actually talking about a less expensive system. And I like the fact that there's enough money in the pool. U.S. waste industry is 60 billion big. We don't need it to go to 70 billion. 60 is plenty. We just have to start rearranging it. And this is what gets me up in the morning, and this is what will help you change. It's not just all intellectual, and it's all not just numbers. This is where you open up your heart to the fact that we may be having a good life in America, but there is catastrophe going on in Central Africa, the villages of Indonesia, to satisfy our demand for consumption and commercial goods. That's our responsibility. It's ethical and it's moral to pay attention to what we're doing with the resources on our planet. And this is, a lot of people, don't want to embrace this part of the story, but if we don't embrace this part of the story, we're not going to be motivated to make the changes we need to make. So the market knows the cost of everything and the value of nothing. Well, we know the value of a compost bin behind a school. That's my kids' school. Those kids love it. They get excited about it. They're embracing their trash can. They're not out of sight, out of mind, which is what the previous generation was. This is what we need. These are resources, and it's hopeful. So that's my little brain trust. In that little group right there is the head of San Francisco, Toronto, New York. Those are some of the smartest people in this country around the zero waste community, so it's not just me. We got together a few years ago, and we put together the bridge strategy. So I'm just showing you that to let you know that I think it's real. I know it's real. And so I look forward to Utah. Go. You can do it. You own the landfill up there by Salt Lake. I think there's no reason not to make progress on this issue. And there's a lot of us out there that are waiting to help you do it. So thanks for having me. Good luck.